Good afternoon. The January 23rd, 2018 meeting of the Stafford County Board of Supervisors is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Bumke?
Here.
Mr. Cavalier?
Here.
Mr. Dudenheffer?
Here.
Mrs. Maurer?
Here.
Ms. Shelton?
Here.
Mr. Snellens?
Here.
Ms. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Meg Bomke. I represent the Falmouth District, and I'm the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. I would like to ask that everyone keep our county administrator, Mr. Tom Foley, and his family in prayer at this time as he is out of town dealing with a family health issue. Colleagues, do we have additions and deletions to the regular agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Yeah, and we do have, yes, we have 5 additions. Item 23, authorization of the county attorney to file a petition for a writ of special election. Item 24, discussion of a timeline for applications, interviews, and selection of the George Washington District candidate. Item 25, authorization of a letter and proposed resolution, R18-37, formally opposing HB 1258 by Delegate Kilgore and SB 405 McDougall regarding wireless infrastructure. And item number 26, proposed resolution R18-39, which requests that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing regarding the repeal of the county's cluster regulations. And item 27, the telecommunication appointee for the Garrisonville District seat.
Motion to approve with those additions.
Is there a second? Okay, please cast your vote. Tally the votes. Okay, motion carries unanimously. We do not have any presentations scheduled for this meeting. At this meeting, the public will have 2 opportunities to comment, either at the 3 o'clock p.m. or the 7 o'clock p.m. If you wish to speak about an item at the 3 p.m., you may not address that same item at the 7 o'clock p.m. meeting. If an item is being heard in a public hearing, you must wait to make comments until the time of the public hearing in the evening session. If you would like to comment during a board meeting, please remain courteous and respectful to the audience and to board members. It is also important for you to keep track of your time at the podium. The board would like to give all interested individuals a chance to speak and stay on schedule to ensure that everyone will have enough time to address the board. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes to address the board. Speak into the microphone slowly, clearly, and loudly. Begin by stating your name and address. Please refer to the light at the podium to monitor the time of your presentation. Green indicates the start of your presentation. Yellow indicates that you have 1 minute to summarize your comments, and red indicates that your presentation time is complete. Right now, we have 1 speaker card, Mr. Greg Gavin.
Gregory Daniel Gavin, 242 Stony Hill Road in Hartwood. Dear members, I'd like to speak today about 1, the lack of debate, and 2, provide a dissenting opinion regarding Resolution R17-311. It authorized the county administrator to reassign and amend the Gauntlet Golf Course lease. The resolution was passed by this chamber on December 19, 2017 as part of a consent agenda. It was item number 13. The consent agendas are used for voting on routine, uncontentious matters with little discussion. It was a mistake to include this contentious resolution with the consent agenda, considering the applicant's poor environmental track record of repeated violations to the 50-foot protected buffer around the lake. During last month's brief discussion, a kind gentleman spoke up praising the applicant's good to the environment, yet he offered no support. He presented no evidence, no anecdotes, no facts, nothing. Can I go to the next slide, please? According to David Whitehurst, Director of Wildlife Resources, VDGIF, in his email dated March 23, 2017, the golf course has made some unapproved and unacceptable changes to our property. According to Rick Bush, Regional Director of Region 4 VDGIF, in his email dated February 13, 2017, if his pictures are correct, the golf course has turned some of our properties into parts of the golf course. Next slide, please. According to John Odenkirk, in his email dated February 15, 2016, they're talking about a whole lot of land. I think this is unprecedented. Our land. Thank you. Again, in his letter to me dated 2017, June 9th, Rick Bush states, as a result of your diligence and watchfulness, we did discover that the Gauntlet Golf Course had indeed violated terms of our latest vegetative management plan and agreement. I'd like to clarify for the record that the damage went on for years, even after verbal and written warnings. It went on. I've been trying to stop it. I'd like to further clarify that these actions are in violations of Stafford County Code 24.1, damaging public vegetation. It's a Class 3 misdemeanor. According to the golf course lease, according to the lease agreement, this is the golf course lease agreement, Section 9, which you have a copy of. Next slide, please. Section 9. Compliance with laws. Any such violation of the law is a violation of the lease. It's a violation of the lease. On record, the golf course has violated terms of Section 9 over 4 times since 2014. The last attempt was made just days ago, just 8 days ago. According to the applicant and his email dated November 1st, back in November 2017, nothing will be touched until January 1st, 2018. This was a little disturbing to me. Mr. Whitehurst called me to assure me that nothing will be touched until further notice. He has a moratorium on the thing. A survey is planned for the spring. I'd asked for money to be sent for the survey. I'd like to thank Mr. Whitehurst and Mr. Bob Duncan, he's the Executive Director of VDGIF, for their time and attention to these matters. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gavin.
Mr. Smith, could I ask staff to get involved in this? Go out to Curtis Lake and get folks that are experts in it and bring a report back to the board next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to address the board?
Paul Wodowski, 8 Pickett Lane. Yes, I knew about sidewalks to nowhere before some of you who tried to campaign on that. I brought my Stafford County utility bill because this is what started me to come here to give more 3-minute speeches to all those faces on the wall, and I was surprised how many faces I know, and I still don't have a county water and sewer bill. But what else is new? Okay, let's start off by congratulations on being selected as the chairman, not elected. We have a new board member who won a 3-way election. We had this a little while ago. So 56.25% of the voters on voting day did not vote for you. So you're not representing 50% plus 1. Now the other person who won by a mere, I can never tell because it's fake news. I don't know if it's 12 votes or 13 votes. I like 13. It's a lucky number for someone. But I also like the word being used in the paper by that some of you know the issues. Wow. There's no such thing as issues in this county. They're called opportunities. And one of the issues that was addressed, because the opportunity was taken, was to appoint a planning commissioner that did not live in a district. And now we have one that lives in a district, and hopefully he got a $100 fine because he didn't know when he was campaigning for the school board how to put authorized and approved on his election signs. Just amazing how some people can't follow the rules. I'm anxious to go to one of the planning commission meetings and see what's really going on. Now on the wall, I see Mr. Thomas is there, and I'll predict this right now. He's one and done. That means one term, and that's it. You all know the Howell Library was named. Why do you think delegates don't run? Because the number one reason is you're going to lose. I brought my citizen complaint because this is still on Route 1. So I'll take that up there right after the meeting. And I'll be back at 7 p.m. with an entirely different topic because the public hearings are right up my bailiwick. I love them, and I want everyone to look at the Stafford map and look at the pretzel of the gerrymandered county. I'm worried about who's going to be selected as the chairman of the board in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waldowski. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Okay, with that, we'll move on to board reports.
Mr. Cavalier?
Thank you. I'll give the report for the Public Safety Committee meeting that we had today. We had monthly reports from both Sheriff Decatur and Fire Chief Lockhart. In addition, some actions that we're going to see today that will need addressed are the FEMA Assistance to Firefighters Grant application. That was recommended by the Public Safety Committee for approval, and that basically allows to receive training on heavy equipment operations, rescue operations in trenches and collapsed buildings and things like that. If I say something wrong, Joe, please correct me out there. And the other thing is the National Capital Region Next Generation 911 MOU that we're going to a program with other Northern Virginia jurisdictions and DC and Maryland that will make the 911 system more interoperable for everyone, and will soon be statewide, and there is absolutely no cost attached to that at this point. So that was a no-brainer. It was also recommended by the Public Safety Committee for approval at today's meeting. And that concludes my report.
All right, and I just want to remind board members, if you do have anything that you want pulled from consent, please do it at the end of your comments.
Mr. Dudenheffer?
Thank you. I was elected last night to be the chairman of FAMPO. I've held that position before. I'll be a little rusty for a while, but there certainly was a lively discussion last night. We were, if you've been paying attention at all, you've noticed that the governor announced that they've approved the funding for and the construction of the northbound bridge and expansion off of I-95 coming across the Rappahannock River. That's something we've been working on for quite some time. And it was, in order to get this done, they had to take it outside of the SMART program, and it's actually being funded by Transurban in anticipation or in lieu of future payments to the state for tolls that are coming up. So for completion, I understand it's going to probably lag the southbound bridge by about a year, but it's very, very good news that we're in the process of clogging up, and I hate to say it, but we'll maybe move part of our problem down to Spotsylvania and keep moving it further south. So, but there are some issues. There was a residual money that the governor mentioned in that plan, which I think is very important, and you need to know that we are diligently trying to find out where the surplus money is going to go. We're interested in, there's the potential for a Garrisonville-like clog at the bottom of the terminus in Spotsylvania County, and that needs to be addressed right away. We don't want to open it and then say, oh, we have a problem. So we're looking at that really hard. A number of issues surrounding that, so we're still waiting for the governor's office and the new Secretary of Transportation to come out with her guidelines on how we can spend the money, how do we apply for the money, where can it be used, what restrictions we may have. So keep an eye out on where we're heading on that, but believe me, we're all over it. Prior to this meeting, we had our first FAB meeting of the year, the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee. I was elected chairman of that. Again, I'm quite rusty, but we'll catch up. We're going to hear a presentation here shortly of the mid-year review on our budget, and it's got mostly really good news, and we're excited about the way the county's moving forward. I'm glad to see that in my absence, the board has stuck with its very stringent financial guidelines that were implemented back in 2010, and they've actually tightened them in some ways. So where we were in the process of having our bond ratings degraded, so our cost of debt would have gone up dramatically, we're now about as high as we can get. We're still working on some kind of increases. So, Madam Chair Lady, that's my report.
Thank you.
Mrs. Mauer.
All right, we had a legislative committee meeting. The General Assembly is in full swing. We've got one interesting piece of good news. The school board this year was one of the years where we engaged in some shared services and asked the school board, met with them, met with our lobbyist, and asked for some of their priorities. And one of their biggest priorities would help address the teacher shortage, and that is reciprocity with other states. So currently, our military members who are coming here for 2- and 3-year stints can't teach in our schools because of this reciprocity issue. And so we sent that up to the General Assembly, and it turns out that that is one of their priority issues. It helps our military members, it helps our teacher shortage, and quite frankly, we have a lot of talented teachers out there that are licensed and doing great in other states, but are not able to teach here in Virginia because of a reciprocity issue. So very happy to hear about that, and also want to thank the schools for bringing that to our attention. Other items are making progress. The day school initiative, one of the things that we learned about over at the retreat is that the day school, or our funding of private placement of children, is rapidly increasing. And it's not because we're having a rapid increase in children, but these private providers are having rapid increases in their fees. And that has become increasingly concerning for the Board of Supervisors, who by statute is required to fund that. And we are not able to fund other educational initiatives because it's kind of sucking up all the oxygen in the room. The difficulty with that is that these private providers kind of have a monopoly on this, and so they can charge whatever they want. And we have an excellent program here. Again, thank you to the schools, where we can educate those children within our community, and but we need some legislative help on that. The proffer bill is coming up for some amendments. Last year, that was of significant concern for this board. We are still united against that bill. It really puts us in a bind, and it looks like there's going to be some amendments to the proffer bill are being proposed. However, it still won't solve the problem that we're finding here in Stafford County. On the gas tax floor, that's coming back up for debate. It's one that's of concern because that's where all of our transportation improvement money. Last year, we asked for a floor at the current level, and this year we also asked for a floor at the current level, but given the change in the makeup of the General Assembly, they might look at a gas tax floor that will go to the 2013, when it was the highest. And this bill became effective. And also, Mr. Cavalier, on the Widewater State Park and the hydrilla issues that you had requested, those are making progress through the General Assembly as well. One thing that is of great concern both to this board and also to the school side is the telecommunications bill, basically withdrawing any authority that we would have from a zoning perspective on telecommunication towers. And on the surface, that's good if you don't have cell service in your district, but quite frankly, one of the way the bill is written, it's heavy towards the telecommunications companies to the point last year that they could have built a cell tower in the middle of a football field and we'd have no say. So we are watching and monitoring and advocating heavily on that. Also attended my first meeting of the CPMT. And that was very eye-opening. It's where we review cases of some of our hardest hit members of our community. And I'm going to look forward to serving on that board because it's an area that I have not served previously. Also had a community meeting, which was hosted by my planning commissioner, Crystal Vanucci, who was also elected as the chairman of the planning commission, so congratulations to her. But we have a rezoning that's coming up in the Rock Hill district, and I believe this is one of the first times that the planning commission has gone out to the community ahead of the Board of Supervisors. And so I want to express my appreciation to her, to notifying all of the surrounding communities, hosting a community, allowing them to weigh in while it's still in the Planning Commission process. And finally, I want to say congratulations to all of the people that were elected. Chairman Brian Roynstadt, who represents me on the Telecommunications Commission, again, Crystal Vanucci on the Planning Commission, and I believe there was one more, on the Utilities Commission, Mike McKee was also elected as chairman, and so I want to say congratulations to them. And two final notes. I know I said finally first. Number one, this is the first time in history that the Planning Commission, the school board, and our Board of Supervisors were represented by all women. So not a big, women's liber, but when we make history, that's something important to note. So I found that quite interesting. And we also have a new program in Stafford County called the YES program. It's not necessarily new, it's revived. And what we're doing is we're allowing high school members to serve as non-voting members on all of our boards and commissions. So I had the opportunity to meet Dylan, who served on CPMT with me yesterday. He's a senior at Colonial Forge. Huge shout out to him. He had a lot of insightful things to add to that committee, and I'm looking forward to the member that's serving on the Planning Commission. I was able to watch him on television. Unfortunately, all of the YES members, all of our student representatives on all these boards are coming from Colonial Forge. So I would like to see this board encourage the schools in their districts to get more participation, because I think it's really a valuable way to get the youth involved in what's going on in local government. And with that, Madam Chairman, I conclude. Oh, yes, and I am pulling 3 items from the consent agenda, number 7, number 8, and number 14.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Shelton?
Following that, that's pretty hard. So the only board and commission that I've actually attended, thank you, the only one, I'm going to back off a little bit though. The only one that I've attended that I'm a member of is FAMPO, and I really enjoy the fact that you are going to be the chairman, because you have an immense amount of knowledge. I think with your knowledge and my passion, we're going to get a lot done, because at that meeting, many of the things that Mark talked about were paramount, and not just in our concerns, but across all the counties. And I really enjoy the fact that now I'm in a position to be able to communicate to you guys what's going on with those, and so you can ask me the appropriate questions so I can become more knowledgeable. I've also shadowed several different other commissions that I'm not part of, or boards I'm not part of. I went to the legislative meeting, and you heard about that. Also the public safety today. And then, in addition, a really fun thing is the ability, and you guys can do this too, but going to some of our other commissions, like the utilities, like the Planning Commission. And an interesting thing I thought I would share with you guys about the Utilities Commission is, frankly, I was told it was supposed to be the most boring meeting ever. It was not. It was really exciting. It was fun. And it was fun from the perspective of, get this fact, and I think this is interesting, is that because of the efficiency of the appliances today, then it's really had an impact on our budgeting process for how we plan to pay for capital improvements in the utilities area. Now, why that's important is because we're not using as much water. And because we're not using as much water, you would think that the increase of our population would be able to balance that out, but it doesn't. And so I just think it's really interesting that in our interest in being efficient, because I'm one of those, I'm a green tree hugger, that it causes us some challenges in different ways. And so I thought I'd share that with you. And I don't have anything to pull off the consent agenda. Thank you.
Mr. Snellings?
Defer, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Bumpkin?
Yes, thank you. I attended the General Assembly prayer breakfast with Delegate Bob Thomas, and it was exceptional as always. I also had lunch at the new Micah Cafe, which is a cafe for our most vulnerable population. It's down at the Fredericksburg Baptist Church. Some of you may have seen the article in the newspaper. I welcome you and encourage you to take an opportunity to go down there and maybe have lunch with Megan Cotter. I'm sure she would love that opportunity. It's very interesting. And that's being served on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 2 o'clock. Shout out to the people in the southern part of the county, or really anybody. Tomorrow night, VDOT is hosting their Chatham Bridge public hearing on the new redesign, and I'm so excited because it's going to have a pedestrian lane in the design. So those people that want to travel between Fredericksburg and Stafford on all the great trails, you will have the ability to do that. So if you want to see that, it's tomorrow night from 5 to 7. At GWRC last night, which is the George Washington Regional Commission, I was appointed as the new chair of that committee. I'm just going to mention a few topics that we discussed. One that's really important, and we've got to make progress in this area, is the solid waste forum. We can't continue to manage our trash the way it's being managed right now, and we've got to look at long-term solutions. There was a presentation by the Rappahannock Health Community Advisory Council. They shared their initiatives and told us more about the progress that they're making on all of our crises out there regarding suicide prevention, the opioid crisis, and mental health issues. And I see Donna Kraus in the audience, and she participated in that. Thank you for your all's efforts, and I'll be serving on that advisory council, taking the place of former Supervisor Laura Sellers. We also executed an agreement with Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation for our grant funds for the ride-sharing program and the authorization of a multimodal study of Lafayette Boulevard. Just a little shout out to one of our partner agencies, and Powerhouse is having their Empty Bowl this Sunday from 5 to 7 at the Elk Lodge. I know a lot of you like to attend, and of course our Commonwealth Attorney, Eric Olson, is always there sharing his favorite chili recipe. And last but certainly not least, I just want to say thank you to our public safety staff that were on the Leland Station incident this morning, taking care of those matters. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to know if the county attorney has anything to report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report at this time.
All right, thank you. And next we have the report of the county administrator, Tom Foley, but in Tom's absent, we have Deputy County Administrator, Mr. Mike Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask Andrea Light, our Budget Director, to come up and give a mid-year review for the fiscal year 2018.
I have my presentation. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrea Light. I am the Budget Director here at Stafford County. Left side. All right. I have more trouble with this remote. We're pleased to say that general revenues are projected to be slightly above our budget, our adopted budget. Real estate and personal property, as compared to what the budget is, are slightly lagging collections at the same time last year. We feel that is partially due to exonerations, but we have our tax base is growing, and we feel like at the end of the year we'll make up any sort of difference. Our consumption taxes, again, remain strong. Consumption taxes are generally our sales tax, meals, and hotel tax. Development service revenue continues to outpace budget. At mid-year, permitting fee revenues are projected to exceed our budget. Activity remains strong, resulting in increased demand for service. On your agenda today, you will have seen proposed resolution 1825 requesting the board to approve 2 FTEs. These slides here provide the board a historical look at the increase in number of plan reviews and the number of inspections performed. As far as expenditures go, our health insurance costs are projected to be slightly under budget, and we will anticipate that we will meet the managed attrition of $500,000. Costs for our Rappahannock Juvenile Detention Center continue To outpace our budget, we'll continue to keep an eye on that. In fiscal year 2017, we did put a reserve in fund balance so that if there is an additional funding in the budget, that we could actually use the reserve for that. During the first quarter review, we identified CSA as an item that we are watching. Today, we will ask the board on proposed resolution 18-23 to budget and appropriate an additional $1.1 million in state funding, as we expect our CSA costs to be $1.9 million over budget. In our September presentation of our first quarter review, we talked about adding to our capital projects reserve because we do have some CIP projects coming up that are really large, and this would provide some cash funding for those. In our school's major project capital, we have asked that meals tax in excess of budget for fiscal year 17 be added, and their debt service savings. For our courthouse project for our county, we have asked that recordation tax above our budget and our debt service savings be set aside to use for the courthouse, and those would have to be budgeted and appropriated at a later time by the board. Our volunteer fire and rescue stations, we know, are anticipated to have some major repairs. It's recommended that the volunteer budgets not spent in fiscal year 17, that we hold those in fund balance for the identified needs for those fire stations. By board policy, we keep a school's capital project reserve that is funded with a minimum of $1.5 million. At the end of the year, all of the school's savings from their budget, which this year was $2.1 million, which is less than 1% of their budget, goes to that capital projects reserve. And the schools then, through the school board, request the Board of Supervisors to budget and appropriate that. At year end, fiscal year 17, we had $3.8 million, almost $3.9 million in that county reserve. Our minimum, if we take back our minimum, add in the meals tax and our unspent debt service, there's available funding to spend of $3.0 million. The county has also capital projects reserve that's based on board policy with a minimum, again, of $1.5 million. We ended fiscal year 17 with a balance of almost $6.3 million in that reserve. 1.5 is required as a minimum balance. There's a number of items on proposed resolution 18-24 the board may choose to consider, or they may choose to consider as the contracts come to them. The board's made decisions in the past to use this capital projects reserve for what its intent is to reduce our reliance on debt. And so they made loans for certain purposes. And this is a listing of our receivables at this point. This also includes, as part of proposed resolution 18-24, a loan to the Lake Carroll Service District. And this slide, again, just provides the board with a look at the list of the strategic year-end investments. Our other funds, both utilities and transportation utilities, water and user fees revenues are slightly above budgets, and expenditures are anticipated to be in line with our adopted budget. Transportation fund, our fuel tax revenue is moderately stronger in the first 6 months than anticipated in the budget. These are the proposed resolutions that are for the board to consider. Resolution 18-22 is a request to release the 5% appropriation hold for the schools that we do as a conservative practice. Again, 18-23 would be the release of the county's 5% appropriation hold that also has a language to budget and appropriate the $1.1 million in state funding for the CSA. 18-24 is again the year-end set-asides,
And 1825 would authorize 2 full-time positions for Public Works and budget and appropriate the additional funding. In conclusion, we do anticipate fiscal year 2018 having positive results both in the general fund, utilities, and the transportation fund. We will continue to monitor, excuse me, CSA and the Juvenile Detention Center to ensure we're not exceeding our budgets. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mrs. Light? No questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I would now like to ask Interim Director Keith Dayton to come up and give a construction report.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Madam Chairman, members of the board, here to provide the most recent information on our capital construction program, that's roads and buildings. Start with the Poplar Road, Mountain View Road intersection, the safety project that we have ongoing. The clearing for the Verizon has been completed. We are still waiting for them to mobilize out there. We're hopeful that they will be out this month as soon as they show up on site, and we have a good estimate of when they will be done. We'll go ahead and advertise for bid. Because of that, we've pushed the schedule advertisement date back to February, but we still expect construction to begin this year for sure. For the Garrisonville Road widening project, signal installation under our contract is now completed. Sidewalk construction is underway. There was sort of a lull when the weather got bad, cold, and snowy. Now they are able to remobilize and begin to pour concrete and that sort of thing again. The Ferry Road intersection project is still on hold, pending some resolution of funding with VDOT, and also some conversation about an easement with the foundation across the road. For Brook Road, our relocation work is underway out there. And, oh, I'm sorry, you had a question.
Mr. Dayton, wonderful to see you back before us. I have a question on the Garrisonville Road widening. And it's not necessarily a question, but it's kind of a lessons learned. We had internet cut to all of those businesses back there repeatedly. I think it was in excess of 5 times, and one of those businesses was actually a suicide support hotline for our military members, which so cutting internet also cut their phone service. Is there a way that we can monitor that a little bit more, have more agreements when they're digging up these road projects and they're cutting vital services to the businesses along those? What kind of lessons did we learn from that?
Well, to be honest with you, Ms. Maurer, it's the same lesson we learned on all of our road projects. We have a lot of utilities in the roadway. Some are well located, some are not well located. We follow the Miss Utility Law, which sort of governs how contractors are supposed to behave when they're doing work out there, and the repercussions when they don't behave well. So we are sensitive to that. That's our own contractor out there in this particular instance, and so we are sensitive to that. We counsel them, we scold them, we can hold them accountable, but unfortunately, in a lot of these road projects, that is our biggest headache, is utilities in the ground, well marked and not well marked, and then contractors do get into them. Back to the Brook Road, we are now out there relocating some Verizon fiber optic within a conduit that's already existing. That's not completed yet. However, we were able to advertise that project in December as planned. Bids are scheduled to open in February. We made some changes from the last offering that we had to either extend lane closures to allow more efficient, more productive work, and hopes that would drive the cost down, or as an option to close the road altogether. And then once we come in with the bid amounts and those options, we'll discuss that with the board to see how they wish to proceed.
Mr. Dayton, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
When you're talking about Brook Road, I know you're and I are exchanging emails about this, but there's some places on Brook Road that unfortunately the weather, the snow, the drainage has caused some critical issues on driving on those shoulders. And the work on that, on the maintenance of those pieces, is that going to impact the work that you're talking about on Brook Road? Or are you, whatever you do to be able to arrange it so that way you're doing maintenance and you're doing capital improvement or whatever those types of issues are? Am I making sense? Because in this Brook Road construction that you're getting ready to do, then my concern is that we do have safety issues on Brook Road, and I wanted to make sure that we integrated those two issues together so that it wouldn't cost us a ridiculous amount of money because we're redoing the same work. Does that make sense?
I believe I understand the question, Ms.
Okay.
Shelton. So the issue that you brought to our attention is a low shoulder matter.
Okay.
And that happens on a lot of our rural roads. And the way we look at it and the way VDOT looks at it, that is an immediate safety concern. What they will typically do, I think, is what you're alluding to. If they know there's a major project going on in an area, they're going to stay hands-off. So they're not going to be out there right away to fix a pothole. However, when that pothole becomes a safety issue, then they will be out there right away, in spite of a project that will start even in a month or two, because that's an immediate concern. So I think as I emailed you, VDOT thought they'd be out there and fix those shoulders already. The winter weather held them up while they were working on some snow and ice removal and that sort of thing. But they are scheduled to be out in the next 2 weeks, and we'll monitor that until that work is done. So their first inclination is don't touch it if there's a major project underway, but if there's a safety concern, they will. Now, once that project gets turned over to the contractor, it becomes their responsibility to fix that within their work zone. So we do get concerns that come to us about a project that's now our responsibility, and we will work with the contractor to get that corrected immediately. And then once long-term, the improvements in that section of road, widening the lanes and adding shoulder will really help that long-term. As many of us are aware on these rural roads, you have pavement, you have a gravel shoulder, and when there's a 2-foot hole right there, if a tire gets off, it's an immediate problem. So,
Thank you for educating me.
sure. As moving on to a couple of trail projects, Phase 4 of Belmont Ferry Farm, we're still communicating with VDOT. A couple comments, just a couple more came in today. We're going to address those immediately. Our hopes are still to have that out on the street to bid this month, but if not, certainly next month. It looks like we're really closing in on construction plan approval on that. And then that work will bid and be underway this year, and hopefully be completed by the end of the year. Belmont Ferry Farm, the Phase 6 portion from the Chatham Bridge out to the George Washington Foundation, we are still working to schedule a meeting to discuss some issues. Right now, we're looking at early February, and we're hopeful that they will confirm one of a couple of dates that we've put forward to them, and then we can move forward. On to a couple of bricks and mortar jobs. Animal shelter. Our building is now dried in, as we call it. We've got the roof on, all the windows and doors are in, so it's enclosed. For utilities, our gas installation is now complete. We are waiting for Dominion Virginia Power to mobilize. They've told us they'll be done in March, but we're hoping to accelerate that. But in the meantime, we have temporary heat, we have temporary power in the building. So the electrical and heating, ventilation, air conditioning work is proceeding unhindered by winter weather. We're all closed in, so we're off and running on that. We expect insulation and drywall to start this month. And paving of the parking lot was put on hold with the winter weather again, but that is now scheduled to move forward. We think we might get it in by the end of this month. Fire Station 14, the school board deferred action on the sewer easement until their January meeting, and so that should come up and go forward right away. And the contractor is scheduled to mobilize right after January. Actually, they issued the notice to proceed this week, and we're expecting them to start some work out there on getting the erosion sediment control and clearing and grading underway very soon. In the meantime, some of the behind-the-scenes work that's very important, submittals, shop drawings, and that sort of thing, has been proceeding at a rapid pace. So a lot of the necessary background work has been done. So when they hit the ground, they should be able to hit it running. Finally, I wanted to mention that VDOT has scheduled the public hearing for the Chatham Bridge renovations. That's a big job, exciting project, and that is scheduled for this Thursday from 5 to 7 at the VDOT District Auditorium, just as a reminder. So happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dayton. All right, we're going to move right on to the consent agenda. We have item 7, 8, and 14 that have been pulled from consent. Do I have a motion for the consent?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All right, cast your votes. Tally the votes. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, item 7 from the consent has been pulled. Ms. Maurer.
Madam Chairman, I pulled this item for 2 reasons. Number one, we're looking at a priority dispatch software CAD system. It's a software system for the fire and rescue, and my concern on that, it was discovered in the Public Safety Committee that IT has not had an opportunity to appropriately vet whether or not it's going to, meet all of our needs, integrate with our current systems. It's one thing to add a software system that has all the bells and whistles, but if we don't have the pipes and the infrastructure available to run that system, then it's not going to do what we need it to do. So that's number one. But number two, we are approving $2.4 million in one-time expenditures that haven't been vetted through our budget process. They were presented before the Finance and Budget Committee today, and I'm concerned about that. I think that items that are outside of our budget process should go on new business and vetted accordingly. I know it's been the business process in the past. Oh, we've got money left over, so we're going to throw it on consent. But I think we owe it to the citizens of Stafford to put that on new business, vet it. Because it was presented on consent agenda this time, I think it would be appropriate to put the entire item on old business, unfinished business, at our next meeting.
Mr. Snellings?
Mr. Smith, are any of these items time sensitive?
No, it's not a problem bringing them back to you next time.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Move to defer till the next meeting.
All right.
Second.
All right, cast your votes. Tally the vote. Item number 7 passes unanimously. That item will be brought to the next meeting under unfinished business. Okay, item 8.
Okay, Madam Chairman, we're looking at, on item number 8, what we're doing is we're adding 2 full-time equivalents, which is a long-term operational expense. And to do it mid-year, outside of our budget process, outside of looking at, how it impacts our 5-year financial forecast, I just think that's a bad budgeting process. And, whether or not we approve these positions and hire them in February, or whether or not we approve them and hire them in July as part of our normal budget process, I just think from a financial perspective, that is a better way to go because they're operational. When we're looking at spending one-time expenses, that's one thing, such as the $2.4 million, but this one has a significant tail to it. So I would like to see these 2 positions incorporated into our regular budget process. In addition to that, there is the argument because we're getting all of these development plan fees, there's additional information that we have requested from Finance and Budget in order to fully evaluate this, and we're waiting for that information to come back. So I would also like to make a motion to defer this item as well.
Is there a second?
Item number 8.
Item number 8. Do you have something?
Are you planning to defer this to the budget,
Yes.
to July?
Well, the budget process starts next month.
I understand that, but you're saying these would be included in the 19 budget?
We can include them in the 19 budget if it's an immediate, need, then we can offer to let them hire early like we did our fire and rescue personnel. But I would like to see it as more an overarching budget process.
It's my understanding it is immediate. Is that correct, Mr. Smith? They're pretty strained over there, I understand.
In order to maintain the service levels that we would like, yes, especially with the building plan reviewer. We have one commercial plan reviewer, and he is very stressed. He's got a lot of work going on, and in order to maintain those commercial reviews in a timely manner, we would like to hire that position.
Now, the other question I have, since this is really self-funded because we charge the fees, it's my understanding that we are right now charging way too much because we don't have the people to pay. Could the folks come back to us and say you're charging too high because state law does not allow us to do that?
We currently don't have the capacity and personnel to do all the work that we need to match the number of permits that are coming in. So we are running a little bit late or paying overtime, so we're not using all the money that's coming in at this time and providing the service that we need. So by hiring another reviewer and possibly an inspector, we could perform those services as needed by the developers and use the money that it was intended for.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
One of the questions that was asked in Finance and Budget that they said that they were going to bring back to us was that analysis, that we are looking at this as a zero-sum game. And the staff had indicated that they would bring that information back, but they did not present that in the Finance and Budget Committee meeting that we hosted a couple of hours ago. And so that was the other concern that I had on these two FTEs. If we wanted to run it like the utilities fund, which is true, that's how we should do it, I wanted to make sure that those numbers were coming out in that particular manner.
Mr. Cavalier, did you have something? Mr. Cavalier?
Well, are we at present asking the current people in those types of positions to work overtime in order to accomplish the jobs that we have on the books right now, to meet the deadlines that we have self-imposed, basically?
I would like to get Keith up here to make sure that I'm accurate. I talked to the building official, and I know that at certain times they're working weekends, but I want to make sure and get that information correct.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Madam Chairman, members of the board. To answer the question from Mr. Cavalier, we handle it in a couple of different ways. With our building inspectors, they do work overtime, and they will work weekends when necessary if there's builders that need them out there. So we do rack up considerable overtime in that regard. With the plan reviewer, what we've been doing is we've been filling in with the building official who's also certified to do those types of plan reviews. That, of course, takes the building official away from other duties that really we hired her for, and that kind of detracts from the efficiency of the department as a whole.
Thank you. Now, it seems, because of the overtime, is that taken into account whenever we supposedly are break even on our fees versus the costs to run these departments? Does the overtime perturbate that ratio in order to meet the goals? I.e., are we basically losing money because of overtime?
Well, losing money, no, sir, I don't believe that to be the case. It's just our expenditures go up relative. So if we added a person, some of the overtime we wouldn't have to pay could be applied towards that. The other way we get hurt, or the community gets hurt, is that we will have to postpone when we have too many inspections come in a particular day. And that's similar on plan review. If we can't get get to them all one day, then they go to another day. If we can't get to them all in 1 week, they go to the next week. So our service levels go down, and we're certainly, we're cognizant of that and sensitive to that. So that is effective in both of these positions as well.
Now, would you say that, what, commercial versus residential here? I mean, I'm more concerned with the commercial aspect here, and as soon as we get commercial things put out, then we start collecting tax revenue on these projects, not so much on residential as much. So what's the breakout there, of commercial versus residential?
Well, I believe there's some data in the background report on the number of permits. I don't have that.
Right. The primary goal of this reviewer is the commercial plan review. Currently, we only have one commercial plan reviewer, and this would take some of the burden off of that person, as well as be able to provide a backup when that person is sick or out on vacation. And right now, the building official has to do that, or the plans lag behind.
Because it says commercial/residential plans reviewer,
Right.
but you're saying it's mostly commercial?
Commercial. We'd have two
Okay.
residential reviewers as well, and they handle the residential work. And once you become a commercial plan reviewer, you need additional certifications, so the residential is one of those that you get on your way to a commercial plan reviewer.
All right,
Thank you.
and so, Mr. Dayton, what I know about our building official, she already has a full overflowing plate every day anyway. So you're absolutely right. A lot of her duties are not getting done if she's overdoing plan review work.
Yes, Madam Chairman,
Yeah.
that's how we feel.
So would the board be amenable to taking this up at the February 6th meeting as unfinished business, and we could gather additional details?
I'll make that motion to defer it to the February 6th meeting.
I can't support that. I support the staff's plan on this one.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Oh. Is there a second? To move it to February? Okay, no second, then we're going to,
I second it, because I was one of the ones who wanted it pulled, so.
okay.
If I could just comment, as I recall in my previous stay here, what we had when we dealt with issues this way was kind of a creep in the number of employees and stuff we had. It has nothing to do with this specific case here. I have no doubt that we have a need, but I think it needs to have very due diligence put on every single new position that we're going to hire, so we avoid that creep in the future. So I would like to have some time to look at it. I haven't had time.
All right, does anybody else have anything else? All right, then we're going to vote on the motion to defer until February 6th, where we have additional information, and it'll come back as unfinished business. Is that correct?
That is
Okay.
correct.
All right, cast your votes. Tally the vote. Okay. All right, the motion carries to bring this back at the February 6th meeting. Thank you. I don't think anybody denies the fact that we need the employees. I think it's just the process. All right, item number 14, Ms. Mauer.
All righty. This item was pulled because our IT department has not had an opportunity to fully vet this IT system. Again, same argument as our fire and rescue system. And a point that, or a discussion that we had in the Public Safety Committee is that it's critically important, and I know we have a lot of new players here, and so getting these business processes are, they're coming along, but this is one that's critically important to me, is ensuring that IT is not at the back end of these systems, but is also in the requirements development process, because ensuring that these IT systems can run on our IT backbone is critically important. And so I am making a motion to defer this item, and gosh, date indeterminate. I don't know when our IT will be able to vet it, so I will rely on staff to let us know when it needs to come back.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion? I have a first motion and a second. Okay, cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion carries unanimously to defer this item. Okay, thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve the regular agenda and the add-on? Oh, I'm sorry, yes, we've already done that. So now we're moving right along to our add-ons, item number 23.
Madam Chairman, I
Ms.
believe you skipped
Bonke.
new business.
Oh,
Item number
New
17.
business.
where am I? Oh.
Item number
Oh, I'm
17.
sorry, thank you so much. I'm jumping a little ahead. Thank you. Number 17, new business. Finance, consider jurisdictional confirmation of our VRE financing.
Randy, our controller, will provide information regarding this issue. Mr. Helwig, thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, VRE looking to refinance $52 million loan. The savings is going to be $600,000 a year. The request for the confirmation for participating jurisdictions, of which Stafford is one. There's a moral obligation under the master agreement. Under the VRA loan, there will be state intercept, which is limited to our present VRE subsidy. Any questions?
Any questions? All right. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for Resolution R18-19.
Madam Chairman, this is actually just a new business item. It's anticipated
There's no, that's
for
right.
action
it
at the
is
next
new
meeting.
business. Okay, so this item, thank you, Randy, this will be coming back at the February 6th meeting. Okay. Yes.
Is there any time? There is no time sensitivity to this?
VRE is actually looking to close on the loan at the end of February. So,
So we have time?
yes.
Okay.
All right, now we're moving on to item number 23. Authorization for the county attorney to file a petition for a writ of special election. Proposed resolution R18-30, and I would like the board to know that this is a time-sensitive matter. Is there a motion?
For clarification, do we have to make a motion and vote to waive our bylaws for the time sensitivity prior to making a motion to approve?
Supervisor Maurer, the board should vote the item as time sensitive and then vote on the actual item itself.
Okay, so I make a motion to waive our bylaws, no?
No.
You don't actually have to waive the bylaws, you just need to find the matter time sensitive.
Okay, then I find this matter time sensitive and I make a motion for approval.
Okay, any discussion?
Madam Chairman, I think we may want to explain to the public what we're asking here.
Okay. Would you
can
like to do that, Mr. Snelling?
I can do that. We're
Thank
asking,
you.
what we're going to be doing is filing a petition in circuit court, asking the circuit judge to set a special election for the George Washington District on November the 6th of this year. Thank you.
All right. We ready to vote? Any additional discussion? We have a motion and a second. Cast your vote. Whoop. Mr.
This
Dudenhofer.
motion is predatory to, not predatory, that's the wrong word. This is a motion we have to do in order to get to the resolution, correct? Yes. We're not voting on the resolution now.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Okay, now,
Madam Chairman, I make a motion for proposed resolution R18-30.
is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? And I would just like to explain to the public that there are different kinds of special elections that you may have. This is called a special election in November because it's not the normal time that the George Washington seat would come up on the ballot. So that's why it's called a special election, but it's run at the same time as the regular November election. So if you hear that term out there, I just wanted to clarify that. Ms. McClendon, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, Madam Chairman, that's a correct statement.
Thank you. Okay, any additional comments?
If, Madam Chair Lady, I think it's important for the public to know that by setting this date, all the rest of the process kind of falls into place. It falls out to political parties. We know they have to decide which type of nominating process they're going to have, but it gives us plenty and ample time for as many candidates or whoever wants to run to prepare and to have a candidacy.
Right, and I would say the board's very excited about this opportunity, and we want to make sure that there will be a press release out on Facebook and an article, we believe, in the Freelance Star. So we want to make sure the George Washington residents know about this, and they have plenty of time to be a part of the process. Thank you. Okay, please cast your votes for R 18-30. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 24, discussion of a timeline for applications, interviews, and selection of the George Washington District candidate. And this,
Madam Chairman, as you know, the court requires you to appoint a district supervisor for the interim within 45 days of his retirement or resignation. We have provided a timeline, a tentative timeline for the board to consider that would have the deadlines of the applications into the county by 12 noon on Friday, February 2nd. This will give the board a chance to review the applications and then conduct interviews or conduct a discussion on the candidates they would like to interview on February 6th, and then conduct those interviews on February 7th. This allows enough time to get the gentleman in place, gentleman or gentlewoman in place, so that they can perform those duties in a quick manner.
okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Yes, and this item is also time sensitive.
Yes, in order to get them in within the 45-day timeline.
There is no resolution,
Yeah.
it's just a memo. All righty, so is this an approval, or do we have to approve these timelines?
It's not necessary for the board to take a formal vote. If the board just agrees with the timeline as proposed, staff will get this information out.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay. By everyone's voice vote, could you please indicate if you're okay with the timeline and this item 24?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 25, authorization of a letter and proposed resolution R 1837, formally opposing House Bill 1258 by Kilgore and Senate Bill 405 McDougall regarding wireless infrastructure.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Toyego is going to provide a brief update as to the details of this particular resolution, if you
That would
don't
be
mind.
great, thank you.
Just a microphone here. Oops. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'm Anthony Toigo. I'm the County Citizen Action Officer for the County Administration Office. The item before you today for consideration is proposed resolution R18-17 that is titled A Resolution Opposing State Legislation Reducing Control Over the Installation and Operation of New Wireless Structures. There are currently two identical pieces of legislation before the General Assembly, and each of them seek to greatly reduce the ability of a locality to regulate the installation and operation of telecommunications facilities. These are House Bill 1258, patroned by Delegate Kilgore on the House side, and Senate Bill 405, patroned by Senator McDougall on the Senate side. Full text of both bills is in your background report, and I did want to touch on a specific language of the bills briefly. First and foremost, the bills would take the administrative approval, would require the administrative approval of all, one, co-locations on any existing structure, any existing pole structure, and two, the administrative approval of the installation or construction of a new structure that is 50 feet or less in height, meaning there would not be a public hearing, it would be approved at the stroke of a pen administratively. That's, of course, problematic for a number of reasons. It takes away constituent input, the public hearing process, and the right of any board to consider the erection of a communications tower. Also, a provision is in the language preventing localities from requiring a special exemption, special use permit, or variances for the term administrative review eligible projects, which is what I alluded to previously. This is a mandate upon localities to provide guidance on incomplete telecommunications facility applications within 10 days, or else a project is deemed approved automatically. Staff has to weigh in, or else it's approved. This also provides the creation of a timeline for administrative approval or disapproval of an application within 150 days. The creation of standards for the application disapproval of a project, including mandating that a locality must, within 30 days, explain the disapproval to the applicant by substantial record of evidence contained in writing to include recommended modifications to assist in the approval of a future resubmission. In other words, we're walking them through the application. Not only are we disproving it, but we're telling them how they can get it approved. And lastly, an imposition of an application fee not to exceed $500. Jeff can touch a little bit more on that, but I believe that our comprehensive plan and our fee structure will be greatly affected as well. Now, proponents of the bill are presenting this as a means of expanding wireless infrastructure in rural areas, and there certainly is some truth to that. And the county is not opposed to the expansion of broadband. I believe Senator Surville at our legislative dinner mentioned that Fairfax is having an issue where they're having many people come to their public hearings in opposition to communications towers. Now, currently, both bills are before the House and Senate Commerce and Labor Committees, and this matter is time-sensitive in the sense that our legislative liaison, Eckert Siemens, feels they could be heard in committee as early as this Thursday. So by having this letter in hand, formally stating our opposition, as well as a board-backed resolution, we're able to provide that clear direction to our lobbyists, stating our opposition and moving forward. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tuigo. Does anybody on the board have any questions? Appreciate you following this legislation. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to consider this time sensitive.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, and do we have a motion and a second already?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, so this item is declared time sensitive. Please cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
We had to approve the time sensitivity, and now we have to make a motion on the resolution. So
Right.
I now make a motion for proposed resolution R18-37.
Okay? All right, any discussion?
Madam Chairman, in my opening remarks, this was one of the pieces of legislation that will have devastating impacts on our community, the way it's written. And they tried to run it like a freight train last year, and it looks like the wireless industry is making considerable ground this year. It's not that we are opposed to cell towers in our rural communities. They're critically important. Broadband is critically important, but the way this particular piece of legislation is written is not the answer.
Okay. All right. Any other conversation, any other discussion? All right, cast your vote. Tally the vote for R18-37. Thank you. The motion passes unanimously. All right. Item number 26, proposed resolution R18-39, which requests that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing regarding the repeal of the county's cluster regulations.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
I would point out that, and further down the resolution, this is a, correct me if I'm wrong, County Attorney, this is a temporary repeal until we can kind of fix some of the things in this ordinance. Is that correct?
I wouldn't call it temporary. Repealing would be the ordinance, but I think the idea is to repeal it while the board and the planning commission works on new regulations.
Okay, okay. Madam Chairman, I'll ask that the bylaw motion, this be declared time sensitive.
Okay. All right. Vote for this item to be declared time sensitive. Thank you.
And Madam Chairman, I would motion to,
Wait, hang on. Tally the
oh,
vote.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Okay, that's declared unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Snellings.
Madam Chairman, I would motion for R 18-39 to send this to the Planning Commission. And I believe it, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Mauer. I believe it has the timelines, they have to have it back to us by the end of February, is that correct?
That is correct, Supervisor Snellings.
Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? All right, cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion carries unanimously. Last item to the add-on, item 27, Telecommunications Committee appointee for the Garrisonville District.
This is just my nominee for the Telecommunication Commission representing the Garrisonville District.
Okay,
And this may also be considered time-sensitive so that he can be appointed before the next meeting.
okay, this
So
item is,
So I move that it be declared time-sensitive.
okay. Cast your vote for time sensitivity. Motion passes unanimously.
And I move for his appointment to the Telecommunication Commission.
Okay, and his or her name is?
Jeff Schrade,
Thank
Jeffrey
you.
Schrade.
All right. Second, okay. Second by Ms. Shelton. Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Congratulations to Mr. Schrade. Thank you for him for serving. The motion passes unanimously. Now, Mr. Snell, we have no items for unfinished business. I think that's it. So, Mr. Snellings, if you could please read us into closed session.
A resolution to authorize closed meeting, whereas the board desires to hold a closed meeting for 1, discussion and consideration of board appointments, 2, discussion of the award of a public contract to construct and operate a field house sports facility involving the expenditure of public funds, where a discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the board. And 3, discussion and consideration of appointment to the vacant George Washington District Board of Supervisors seat, and whereas pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A1 and A29, such decisions may occur in closed session. Now therefore it be resolved that the Stafford County Board of Supervisors on this day does hereby authorize discussion of the above matters in closed session.
Second. All right, cast your votes. Tally the vote. Unanimous, the board is now in closed session. Good afternoon, the board is out of closed session. Do we have a motion to certify?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion carries. We are now adjourned until our 7 o'clock meeting.
So I believe these churches that are using our public facilities, using our public grounds, need to go find a private area to rent and do something. And the reason I bring this up is when I went to public schools, I was forced to go to, it was called religious instruction. So we were bused to a parochial school, and we were forced for 1 hour to have religious instruction. Now, I have a very strong spiritual side, so I have nothing against the churches that are there. But yesterday on Facebook, some of you call it comic book. There are some true statements out there in regards to bringing the Life Church pastor down to Richmond to lead something. Well, I spent 15 years at the Senate, so I know Chaplain Black quite well. He's a great leader, not only for the Senate, but for our country. So I just want to make citizens aware that there is a distinction between church and state.
Thank you, Mr. Wodowski. Is there anyone else that would like to speak at the dais on anything that's not related to one of the public hearings? Okay. With that, we'll move to our first public hearing. Item 18, consider authorizing the county administrator to convey county-owned property and execute a memorandum of agreement for a future Germanna Community College Center.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As you know, in May 2016, the county received a dedication of approximately 25 acres on tax map 39-18 from developer H.H. Hunt to be used for a future Germanna Community College Center. The dedication required Germanna to establish the center and use it for permanent public use within 5 years. If not, it would be conveyed back to the county. Germanna expressed concern due to the time it takes to establish a center. The concern was reviewed by the Community Economic Development Committee in May of 2017, and the committee supported a change to allow for up to 20 years for the public use. In order to protect the county's interest and the interest of Germanna, it was proposed to convey the property to the Germanna Community College Foundation, Real Estate Foundation, with conditions that the property would not be conveyed to the state until it was ready for construction of the center. If after 20 years it is not conveyed to the state, it would revert back to the county for an alternative public use. In order to proceed in this manner, Germanna Community College has taken steps to reestablish the foundation and has worked with the county attorney on a memorandum of agreement, which will include the conditions required for a transfer to the state and for a transfer back to the county if they do not meet the necessary requirements. Staff recommends approval of R 18-29. I would also like to introduce Dr. Janet Gullickson, the president of Germanna Community College, and have her come to the podium so that if you have any questions, you can ask them of her.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Does anyone have any questions on this particular item?
Not for her, but I do have a question regarding
Okay. Okay. If there's anything you'd like to share with us, you may.
If I might. First, I want to thank you very much as a county waiting for us patiently to get our legal ducks in a row. And we have a real estate foundation. I have actually with me tonight the president of our real estate foundation, Bruce Davis, as well as Jack Raleigh, who is on our both foundation boards, actually both our regular foundation and our real estate foundation. We are very excited to launch in the fall in our lease space, our new lease space. We have about 17,000 square feet, 18,000 that we will be filling. And I just want to let you know that one of the opportunities we are offering that we couldn't have done without even this lease space is building out a full RN program to be offered in Stafford County. And that will be the leaders, if you would, for other growth that we will need to build a center. We are on the list in terms of the chancellor and the VCCS, Virginia Community College System Board. They're very, very glad that we have this opportunity. I also want to thank Rashida, who has done, Ms. McLennan, who has done a wonderful job working with our attorney to get an agreement that I think will work both for the county and for the college, and I really have deep respect for her work. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Dudenhover.
Thank you very much for being here. Just a question, your funding for construction will come from the legislature?
For the center, it would, well, you could pay for it, but I always say that when people ask that question. But in the likelihood that you maybe don't want to do that, or I can't do it either, it would come from the legislature, yes.
So have you requested the funds yet?
We
You
are
have
on the-
someone carrying a piece of a budget amendment to see you can get started?
There's a very rigid process in the Virginia Community College system for approval for buildings and property acquisition. So while we are on the list, you can't carry a separate bill, let me say it that way, just for this property. But we have the full support of the system office as well as the Virginia Community College Board. So when the time comes and there's appropriate numbers to build a center on that property, we will do it.
Okay, ma'am. one more
Great question, thank you.
Have you designed what you're thinking about putting there? Do you have a general development plan of some sort?
Well,
And then an estimate of how much it's going to take?
cost-wise,
Yes.
it would probably take about 19 million, 15 to 19 million. Some of that will be the responsibility of us to raise, but I would say we could get a fabulous facility for $19 million.
Okay, thank you.
And if I might also address enrollment, because that's really the key to being able to build that center sooner rather than later. We are really beefing up, if you would, our offerings starting next fall in our new rental space, and that will include cybersecurity, business administration, the entire associate transfer degree, as well as workforce development courses. And we are in the conversation to acquire another 5,000 square feet on that property where we will offer our health programs. So
Okay.
we're building that
Thank you.
momentum.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Wilkerson, where will that space be, those classes, the cybersecurity?
They will be in the rental facility that, I'm going to ask Mr. Rowley to describe it because he knows better than I, Stafford. It's just down the road from the hospital.
Yes, it's in property just down the road from the hospital, next to the Aberley apartment development.
Okay, where we always projected. Okay.
Yes, and the permanent 25 acres that's in this resolution tonight is behind Aberley. The temporary facility is being built by a subsidiary of Virginia Properties, and it's, as you come into Aberley, it's to the left.
Okay, and there's another brick structure back there behind the apartments that was completed about 2 months ago. That's not it.
Not to my knowledge, I'm not sure which
Okay.
structure you're referring to.
Okay, thank you. But it's back there. That's what I needed to know. Thank you. All right, anything else?
Thank
All
you
right.
for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming. Okay, at this point in time, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak to this item?
Well, I'll come forward if that's okay. My name is Jack Rowley. I live at 7 Wallace Farms Lane in the Hartwood District. I'm a member of the Stafford County Economic Development Authority, have been for many years. Our economic, and I also chair the working group that supports Germanna. Our Economic Development Authority supports 100% this resolution and 100% in helping Germanna expand in the community. We've gone so far as we have said that we have a matching grant from sale proceeds of land we have on Route 1 that would be dedicated to Germanna's expansion to a permanent campus. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, and thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Paul Wildowski, 8 Picket Lane. So we're going to build it and they will come. God, it sounds like a movie. No GDP. And $19 million, is that in 2018 dollars or 2038 dollars? Let's go back to our own high schools. We just tore down a $39 million one and replaced it with $65 million building. So it seems unrealistic to me economically that you're going to build something for $19 million. And I'm glad that we've had someone who's been in the legislature ask about the funding. And I love excuses from community colleges because they don't know the process of higher education. They don't get involved right away, and they think cybersecurity and teaching RNs is going to save their brick and mortar in the 21st century. Good luck.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Okay, at this point in time, I'll close the public hearing. I'll bring this back to the board. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chairman, for approval.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion on R18-29? Ms. Mauer.
So 20 years is a long time. Let me start with, I am fully supportive of this. This is something that we worked on back when I was on the EDA, and, excited that I get to be involved with this on the Board of Supervisors. My only concern is in the way this is worded a little bit. Because the foundation was just recently reestablished in order to transfer the property, I would like to see some provision on what happens should the foundation dissolve. And so if it doesn't happen in 20 years, it reverts back. But also, if there should be some dissolution of the foundation, I think we should have a provision in which it transfers back to the county as well.
Supervisor Mauer, if that's a material term for the board, I recommend it be added to the resolution. That way we will ensure it makes it into the final agreement.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay.
Do I need to make an amendment to the motion?
I would ask the motion maker to amend the motion or make a substitute motion.
Yeah, I'll amend the motion to include that in the agreement.
All right. No other discussion. If everyone could please cast their votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, item 19, our next public hearing, consider an amended agreement for the use and maintenance of a public right-of-way in Argyle Heights.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. May I have the computer, please? So the board was introduced to this subject at the December meeting, so I'll make it brief. There is a portion of Kent Avenue, that's in Argyle Heights subdivision, that was platted along with the subdivision as public right-of-way, but it was never improved and not accepted into the state system for maintenance. The board back in 2006 authorized an agreement with two property owners adjacent to that unimproved area of Kent Avenue that would allow them to construct and maintain a driveway to access their properties so they could build on them. There were provisions in the agreement that allowed the county to terminate the agreement if they didn't meet certain conditions for maintenance of that driveway. The owners have found that termination clause prevents them from getting financing to move forward and build a house on that property and develop it. So they're requesting relief from the termination provision. Once we started looking at that agreement, staff also felt like some language to make it a little more explicitly clear that the public would have unrestricted right to use that right-of-way even if there were this agreement was executed. So when we took a look at it, we felt like we should modify the agreement to address that issue. Just the location map, you'll see that Kent Avenue continues straight on. It is that unimproved area that is the sole access to the public right-of-way for 58A 151 and 58A 153. So that's the area in question. We have looked at it, and there's virtually no chance that that would become extended as a public right-of-way to access adjacent property. I'm sure that it was intended as a stub for an adjoining property, but that property was not developed where they would ever make use of that. So as we looked at it, we felt like amending that existing agreement to change the language that would prohibit, remove the language allowing termination by either party unless the right-of-way was abandoned, which I'll get to in just a moment. And then we added language that clearly specifies the right of the general public to use that right-of-way. So a public hearing is required pursuant to Virginia Code. And if executed or ultimately approved and executed by the county administrator, the owners then feel like they can go ahead and obtain loan and proceed. But we also wanted to include language that would deem the right-of-way no longer necessary for public use. That allows us to follow a process where there's an advertisement and opportunity for public input for 30 days, and then the board could come back to the board and consider abandoning the right-of-way since it is no longer needed for road construction. If there is a contesting of that measure, then we would need to go ahead and do a public hearing to consider that additional input. If it's uncontested, then the board could act to abandon the right-of-way in any manner it so desires. We do recommend approval of this resolution R1811 that would allow execution of the amended agreement and also declare the right-of-way is no longer necessary for public use. We have received, even though it's not been approved, the owners felt strongly enough in favor of this that they've gone ahead and executed their part of the agreement. So I guess that demonstrates that they are certainly in favor of proceeding in this manner if it's the board's wish to continue that way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dayton. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Dayton? Okay, thank you. At this point in time, we'll open the public hearing on item number 19.
My name is Gordon Gay. I'm an attorney and represent the people who own the properties. As Keith said, that we're so much in favor of the language that they have already signed the documents and given them to Mr. Dayton for execution. I would like to thank Mr. Dayton and the county attorney's office. We've been working very closely with them, and they've been very helpful on this. As you know, the old agreement had an atom bomb type of penalty here, that if somebody didn't agree with it, it could be terminated, and then there would be no access. So obviously, if we're buying property and building houses, that the lender cannot possibly lend the money for the construction or the purchase under those conditions, that somebody could come along and cut off the access to the property. I don't think you can do that anyway, but the language would scare them off. So this works very, very nicely to eliminate those problems. The other suggestion to terminate the road in the future and abandon it, it's been my experience that when you abandon a road such as this, or a right-of-way, it's usually split down the middle, so the property's half on one side and half on the other. I think that would be a problem if that's the only way it can be done, because, Keith, could you put the picture back up on the, I don't know how you work your machine here. There it is, right there. If you look at the roadway, the people who have the house on the right-hand side, if property was split down the middle, they would have really no impetus to maintain that half because they're on the paved surface and up front. If the property can be abandoned and the entire property go to the people on the left-hand side, that would be fine. But if it's split down the middle, then you have a problem of maintenance, of who's going to maintain the other person's half of the road, and it could be very sticky. So that's just a question for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gay. Would anyone else like to speak to this public hearing? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing on item number 19. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair Lady.
Yes.
In lieu of the fact that we don't have a George Washington supervisor, I'd like to go ahead and move for R 18-11.
Okay.
Second.
All right, any discussion on this item? All right, please cast your votes for R 18-11. Tally the votes. Motion passes unanimously. All right, with that, we're going to move right along to item number 20. Consider an amendment to the zoning ordinance regarding parking standards for manufacturing and storage uses. I'm going to open this public hearing, and Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, board members. My name is Jeff Harvey. I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning. This public hearing is to consider an amendment to the zoning code, specifically dealing with parking for manufacturing uses and storage facilities and storage uses. Our current code requirement stipulates that there be 2.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of building area for a manufacturing use. Also, for a storage use, there'd be minimum of one parking space per 1,000 square feet of indoor space, as well as one parking space for 2,000 square feet of outdoor space. The county had received an inquiry from a company in the county that plans on expanding its manufacturing operation. However, as they looked at their plans, they realized that our parking standard is much more higher than what their operation needs. So that led us to a discussion with the Planning Commission and the board's Community and Economic Development Committee as to, are our standards adequate, and what should they be? In doing the research, the Planning Commission looked at an option that was discussed at the CEDC, which was to set a parking standard based on number of employees during the maximum shift size. That was later looked at and determined that it would probably be better to go with a square footage requirement. The Planning Commission looked at surrounding jurisdictions and did find indeed that we were on the high end of the parking requirement. They also looked at the Institute of Traffic Engineers studies for parking generation and found out that we were exceeding the national study standard. So this proposed amendment reflects what is in the national study standard for manufacturing uses at one space per 1,000 square feet of building area, and then also too it falls into relative compliance with our surrounding jurisdictions for storage, which would include one parking space per 5,000 square feet, regardless of whether it's indoor or outdoor. The Planning Commission held its hearing on this matter in December and is recommending approval. Staff does as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Any questions? All right. Thank you. I have one speaker card on this item, Mr. Mark Schieffer.
Thank you. My name is Mark Sheffer, and I'm Director of EH&S and Management Systems for MAPE Corporation. I currently reside at 598 Edgebrook Lane, West Palm Beach, Florida. MAPE is the leading worldwide manufacturer of adhesives, sealants, and chemicals for the construction industry. We have 73 manufacturing plants in 33 countries on 5 continents, including 21 in North America. In 2017, we celebrated our 80th anniversary, and I'm proud to say that we've enjoyed being part of the Stafford County business community for the past 20 years. We'd like to thank you folks for supporting us, supporting the growth of our business in the Mid-Atlantic region over the past 20 years. We've been blessed with strong growth in our business in recent years, and we are investing heavily in our plants and equipment in the Americas. We are considering a substantial investment in our Stafford County plant to help support this growth in the region. But we need your help. Current zoning ordinances in Stafford County related to employee parking is not optimal for manufacturing and is inconsistent with what we encounter in developing sites and adding new plants elsewhere in North America. As manufacturing has become more and more efficient, to remain competitive in the world economy, labor content and number of people required to produce and ship a given amount of product has been reduced. MAPE, as well as many other manufacturers, have become highly automated. The number of employees and subsequently the number of required employee parking spaces needs to reflect this improved productivity. This space needs to be redirected to practical uses in order to make our businesses more competitive. MAPE has reviewed the proposed zoning ordinance amendment that you are considering tonight and find it to be very consistent with our needs and the needs of most manufacturing operations. We respectfully encourage you to adopt this proposed change so that we and other companies like MAPE can move forward with the development of highly efficient and globally competitive manufacturing facilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to speak on this item?
Good evening. My name is Chris Kowalski, and I live at 44 Cannon Ridge Drive in the George Washington District. Good evening, board members. I've been working with MAPE on this particular issue. I am an engineer, and I just wanted to support this ordinance 018-17, bringing the parking requirements in Stafford County in line with the adjoining neighboring localities will definitely be a benefit to the county. Obviously, economically, playing on a level playing field with your neighbors definitely will help attract businesses to the county. In addition, some of the other engineering aspects would be more open space on parcels, larger building footprint should the user desire on the same parcel of land, as well as my personal favorite, less stormwater runoff coming off the sites that I have to deal with. For those reasons, I think that this change will definitely benefit the people of Stafford County, and I fully support the changes that have been shown in this ordinance. I think it's very fair. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to follow Paul skill, knowledge, and imagination. That's what I say. Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane. I, too, am in favor of this. It's one of those things where you still have these 20th century standards of, let's see, 2.5 spaces required. Sounds like government is pushing something down on us. I guess you could put 2.5 Model Ts in there, and they're all going to drive to work. And like the man said, brick and mortar's going away. We have automation. God's not making any more land. God knows you've paved enough parking spaces in this county. And the stormwater runoff is atrocious. I'm just using my time because I just like making people aware that sometimes we go through things and they wonder, what's it for? But it's a really good thing to see a company that's been here 20 years. I didn't even know you existed here, and I've been here 27 years. I'm glad to know that. I'm sure Germana will be here in 20 years too. Ha ha.
Would anyone else like to speak at the podium? With that, I'll close the public hearing.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion for approval of ordinance 018-07.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, please cast your votes. Tally the votes. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Thank you. We are now going to move on to item 21. Consider an amendment to the zoning ordinance to allow drive-through facilities with a conditional use permit in certain zoning districts. Mr. Harvey.
Madam Chairman, this proposed amendment would be pursuant to ordinance 018-08. It would amend our zoning code to stipulate that drive-through facilities are specifically allowed in our commercial and industrial zoning categories. Currently, drive-through facilities in our zoning code are limited to our highway corridor overlay districts. Those are the roadways in the county, for the most part, that have a lot of commercial development along them, either existing or planned, and they're also areas that have a lot of traffic congestion. The purpose of that district was to facilitate access management. In particular, the corridors that apply are Route 1 south of Garrisonville Road, Route 3 in its entirety, Route 17 from Route 1 over to Richards Ferry Road, and also Garrisonville Road from Interstate 95 out to Toluca Road. So right now, there's limited areas within the county where drive-through facilities are currently allowed, and they are allowed in the highway corridor overlay zones through a conditional use permit. That conditional use permit gives the Board of Supervisors an opportunity to see the proposed development plan and the building architecture to ensure that the county's getting quality development. So this proposed amendment would expand essentially the ability to have drive-through facilities throughout the county where a commercial development proposes such a use associated with their business. The Planning Commission reviewed this proposed amendment and has recommended approval. Staff does as well.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Mr. Harvey?
Mr. Harvey, I have some questions, and I'd really like some additional information. Just like the last ordinance that we were talking about, I think this is a great opportunity for us to look at things differently. One of the things that I didn't see that I wanted to see was a comparative view of all our peer communities. And so within the Planning Commission, there were 3 peer communities that were reviewed. And so there were some very interesting discussions that came out of it. So my first point is I'd really like the information for those 7 peer communities that we usually go through, if you don't mind doing that. And if there's no information that's available for them, which I think there is, then just let us know that these particular counties don't have those. The second thing that I thought was interesting is that within the Planning Commission, when they were talking about one of our peer communities, I saw a really great opportunity for us to be able to improve our business processing through planning. And what I mean by that is I think it was just really interesting how some counties put in performance measures. So they call them performance. It's y'all's term. I think of performance differently at the moment. And so they allow for the opportunity of performance measures, so that gives people on the outside of guidelines to be able to develop their architecture diagrams. Now, why I think that's important is because these individuals are business owners, and so when every day that they're not open, they lose money. And so if we have the opportunity to be able to give them guidelines on where, in this particular case, we're talking about drive-throughs, if we can give them those guidelines ahead of time, that set not standards, but guidelines, then that might be able to give them the opportunity to come through our planning process a lot faster and therefore get open. So I would like us to consider looking at performance standards, you name it, whatever you want. Spotsylvania called it performance standards. And see what that looks like for us, because I think that's a more business-friendly attitude, and not that we're bad. I don't mean it like we're bad, but I think it's a more business-friendly attitude from Stafford County to say, these are guidelines that we want you to do, and please meet those before you meet with us. And then doesn't mean that we don't want you to have a conditional use permit, but it'll just speed up their process.
Yes, ma'am, we'll be glad to do that if that's the board's desire.
It makes me happy.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Harvey? Okay, thank you, Mr. Harvey. Would anyone from the public like to address the board on this item?
Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane. Citizens of Stafford County, you should be aware that during the lame duck session, that this is one of the items that came up during the clinic that was approved. And this is really a bad idea of favoritism. For the Boy Scouts who don't know what fairness is when Lady Justice wears a blindfold, then she's impartial. She knows we all bleed red and we're human. When she's favoring someone, she puts a pirate's patch on her right eye and she favors the left, which are the Democrats. And when she puts a pirate's patch on her left eye, she favors the right, which is the Republicans. Yes, I'm an independent thinker, but Trump's my buddy. Now, what's important here is I do like the suggestion of a performance standard and a guideline, so we don't have some contractor come in here and say, oh, we have to have this drive-through for this clinic that attaches to our hospital. And even if we have to overlook that we're not following our own, what do you got, your own rules that you're supposed to follow? So CUPs are a good thing, and they should favor the right aspects. And I would never get rid of a CUP. But when you're favoring something that's bad, and this is a bad idea, you need to go back to the drawing board, get a new baseline, add some of the suggestions that were brought up, and take a business approach. Because business has the word in it, just like the word brain does, and the word think, and the word mind. And issues only has the word is in it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak at the podium? All right, at this time, I'll close the public hearing.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to defer this item. Yeah, can we defer it to, if we defer it to the next meeting, does that give staff enough time to get the additional information to us that I asked for? The additional information I asked for were specifically for the peer communities and a recommendation of performance standards. Does that mean it has to go to the Planning Commission? Okay.
Ms. Shelton, staff can put that information together for the board for your next meeting.
I'll second that motion.
All right, any discussion? We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote to defer to the next meeting. Tally the vote. Thank you. That item will be deferred to the February 6th meeting. Okay, our last public hearing tonight is item number 22. Consider an amendment to the zoning ordinance to amend the definition of a hospital to include all departments or divisions under the hospital license. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You essentially summarized the content of the public hearing. Part of the background of this proposed amendment is that we had a freestanding emergency room that wanted to be established in the southern part of the county. The proponent noted that they felt, in their opinion, they would be classified as a medical clinic, which is a by right use in the B2 zoning category, which they were wanting to locate in. Upon review, the zoning administrator did not agree with that, specifically because the freestanding medical clinic or emergency room was essentially under the license of a hospital. Based on the way our zoning definition was written, and it currently exists, is that any a hospital is in accordance with health department licensing requirements. So this proposed amendment would make it more clear as to what other facilities would fall under the definition of a hospital.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Mr. Harvey? All right.
I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to commend you guys because I understand that they pulled their request, and yet staff went through to make a change to that ordinance to clean it up. Good for you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone in the public like to speak on this item number 22, our last public hearing for the evening?
Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane. Once again, this is another example of passing something through the lame duck session of a medical clinic. If you really look through last month's aspects of the CUP, the medical clinic, using a 2006 TIA, we have a divergent diamond coming to the area. And now you're going to redefine the word hospital? Come on. Let's be realistic here. How many medical clinics do we have in Stafford County now? Remember, we had the Guinness Book of Records for the 7-Elevens. Every time a 7-Eleven goes out, we have a medical clinic. So now we want to change considered a medical clinic to an emergency room. So what is it? I mean, you need to get the definitions of words right. And I've given you the root word in to think about because, you know, in's important. If you knew Latin, you know that has in it. And that's where hospitals are based off of, believe it or not, you know, Latin. That's where I started my career, in a U.S. Air Force hospital. And I have great experiences with that hospital across the street there. So I'm watching every move that goes on in that aspect. And what really bothers me the most is that you violated your own bylaws during a lame duck session and let this medical clinic even get on the books. Simply amazing.
Thank you, Mr. Waldowski. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Bring this back to the board.
Madam Chairman, I would move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments? Ms. Mauer.
So I want to provide some clarity here because I'm fearful that this is going to get out into the news that we're regulating under hospital licenses clinics, which would include something that I use quite frequently, which is Patient First. 3 small children, we were there almost as if we had a standing appointment. This isn't going to regulate or include in the regulations them as hospitals. What we're doing is we're cleaning up an ordinance that where the definition, it all had to do with a large piece of equipment, and the large piece of equipment that was going into this freestanding emergency room, which was in South Stafford, required a license for a hospital. And so if it required a license under the Virginia State Code for a hospital, then we should also classify it as a hospital and regulate it as such. So just want to be very clear that we're not, changing the ordinance where all these patient-first clinics and the kids med clinics are going to require extra scrutiny and licensing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mauer, for clearing that up for everyone, because if you hadn't, I would have. I mean, a medical clinic, this is entirely different than just a medical clinic. This is actually licensed by the state hospital, and it just clears up the ordinance. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Okay, if you would please cast your vote for O18-09. Tally the votes. That motion passes unanimously. And with that, declare this meeting over. Thank you.